Welcome to the Passing Through Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring those spaces not just within, but also between and around us. The cracks in the walls, the moments between the moments, the silence that stitches a song together. This isn't a podcast about answers or about fixing the world. It's a space for listening, for slowing down and sitting in the unknown to see what might surface in the stillness. Right at the exact moment that I just pressed the record button, a cat has entered the building. You might even hear it meowing in the background. You hear it? It's weird because he had just come in before. I guess he ate some food. Maybe he defecated all over the litter box in the bathroom. Not sure what he did. Maybe it was both of those things. And then he quickly departed. So I thought it would be a good time to record an episode because I would be undisturbed. However, he's back. And I don't know what this visitation means exactly. Does he have some message for us? Is there some wisdom he wishes to impart? I don't know. I don't speak cat. Although I could tell you a weird story about a cat that I had when I was growing up in New York. Maybe I will. But before I do that, for a moment, I just want to pause here because this isn't the introduction that I expected to give. I was going to say something different. I was going to talk about how if you're a new listener to this podcast, you are probably accustomed to hearing me interview guests. And you may not know that I sometimes do solo episodes where I just get in front of the mic and ramble and talk about what's going on and maybe share a story and give you little vignettes and updates into the happenings and goings on of my life. If you're curious about those kind of things, you can dig back deep into the annals of this podcast. You can go crate digging for weird stories and rambling, raving rants. But if you don't like those things, and that sounds unappealing to you, then this may not be the episode for you. So that's the disclosure here at the beginning. If you're curious about stories about cats, maybe weird, disjointed ideas and thoughts about grief, community, love, the cat just made another appearance. He's at a new location now, peering in at me from the crack in the door. He's turning away now. He's going back in through another door. No, he's back again. Okay. Hopefully that was the last interruption from our feline friend, but something tells me that he is going to be prowling and stalking us throughout the duration of this episode. I will keep you updated on his whereabouts, his sounds, and whatever else might be relevant. I don't know where I was in my train of thought before that happened. I think I was telling you about the thoughts that I might be having about certain topics, which will probably return during the course of this episode. I know I was speaking about a cat that I had when I was young in New York, and this has some correlation to dreams too, which is a topic that I wanted to discuss. I didn't really have any explicit topics in mind, actually. These just sort of emerged at the moment that I pressed the record button. So I will entertain them and embellish them and try to create some coherent narrative out of these little threads that are making their way to me from some unknown place. So I had this cat when I was back in New York, and I had it for a long time. My mom had an obsession, a fixation on white cats. It had a green eye and it had a blue eye, and it was deaf. As is often the case with albinism in animals, sometimes they have problems with things like sight or hearing, motor function, digestive issues. Usually animals, if I understand correctly, I've never deeply researched this, but just from the cursory understanding that I have, animals who are born albino don't live very long, generally. So what was unusual about this cat was that it happened to live a very, very long time. The last time I knew about this cat, because I don't know where it is now, the cat actually has an interesting story. It was about 18 years old, I think, and it didn't even look old. It didn't move like it was elderly. It didn't behave like it was elderly. To any person who just came across this cat, it would have looked young, lustrous, vibrant, ferile. Is ferile even a word? Is that a mix of virile and fertile? So this cat, for some reason, had a special affinity for me. My brother, my sister, my mother, my father, everybody else in the household, it was kind of cruel to. It would just sit on top of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and as you would pass by, it would just smack your fucking head as you were passing, try and grab your ear, playfully. It wouldn't claw you. It's not like it's just going to gouge your eye out from the top of the refrigerator, which is kind of a cat thing to do just for fun, to, like knocking a cap or a cup off of the edge of a table just for the fuck of it. Cats like that kind of stuff. They are agents of mayhem. They are tricksters. They're sneaky. So he'd be up there hiding, just waiting for someone to walk by, some unsuspecting victim to just pass by the fridge, and you would just get just smacked right in the head. So he would do those kind of things. If you were petting him, he would abruptly turn on you and just bite you, or, hiss at you, or any imaginable cruelty that you could think of, he would be prone to unleash on you. Except for me. For some reason, for me, he was often neutral, and on a good day, he would be cuddly even. I don't know why this was. I had never done anything to the cat to appease him. Maybe this was why. He saw a lack of compromise in me. He knew that if he had the audacity to clap me on the head as I was walking by, that perhaps I would have just dislodged him from the top of the fridge and catapulted him across the room. I don't know if I would have done that, but I was younger back then, so who knows what I was capable of.
Has this ever happened to you? You're on your way back to the living room after taking a nice steaming dump in the bathroom, and all of a sudden, as you pass the refrigerator, a cat emerges and just slaps you silly. Slaps that look right off your face. You find yourself careening backwards, crashing into a pile of paper towels and inappropriately stacked magazines, newspapers, and other items that you haven't been tending to, and you spill all over the floor while the cat's up on top of the refrigerator looking at you and laughing like he is some lion at the top of a mountain, and you are just on the floor humiliated in front of all of your friends who are waiting for you to sit back down and crack a cold one with the boys. Well, here at Catapult, a Dolos company, we have found an ingenious way using modern technologies in space-age aluminum and metallurgy to create the Catapult. All you have to do is fit the top of your refrigerator with our contraption. And as soon as your cat shows the gall to embarrass you in front of all your friends, you just open our app and you press the launch button. And this will send your cat flying off the top of the refrigerator. He will be the center of attention. The entire party will be laughing. And everyone will forget about you lying in the floor in your own filth and garbage with your head bleeding from where the cat scratched you. So if you want your dignity back, you want to be the king of your castle, get Catapult now.
Catapult. Actually, I should probably clarify. I'm not advocating animal abuse there, and I'm this is kind of me being facetious. So just to clarify that. So me and this cat had a special relationship, and there were times, and I still don't really know how to explain this, but it intersects with dreams. There were times where I would be asleep and a normal dream, whatever that is, would be playing out, right? I'm maybe dreaming of driving a car somewhere across the desert. In the distance, there's some dreamy, simmering mirage coming up out of the desert sand, an oasis revealing itself to me on the horizon. And the dust is being kicked up behind the wheels. The sun is low in the sky. Maybe some classic rock song is playing in the background, Hotel California, or Ramble On by Led Zeppelin, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Take your pick. And then suddenly the cat would appear, the cat would penetrate the dream. Suddenly in the passenger seat, wearing a seatbelt and a cowboy hat, and maybe with a revolver even on his side, would be this deaf albino cat with a green eye and a blue eye. And usually when that happened, I would start to get the vague sense that something unusual was happening. You know, it wasn't already unusual that I was probably without a driver's license behind the wheel of a vehicle driving towards a mirage in the desert. Nothing was unusual about that, but the moment the cat appeared, then I knew something was strange. And I would look at the cat, and in the dreams, the cat would have an ability to communicate with me. The cat would be able to say things, blast images to me, this other form of communication that was non-verbal, but it wasn't body language. It was like projections, or, the cat had the kind of shamanic quality to be able to bridge the realms, enter the dream world, and communicate. And you might think, yeah, that's just a dream. That's normal. That's weird. But yeah, I've had similar dreams. There's nothing strange about that. Except in this dream and in other dreams like it, I would wake up and the cat would be there in bed with me, staring at me. It's not like the cat is asleep at my feet, cuddled up somewhere, or in the room. The cat is in the bed, looking at me with this knowing look, as though it were there the whole time, staring at me while I was asleep, blasting itself into the ether, a broadcast just going straight to my brain from this cat. And that happened on more than one occasion. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know what the fuck that is. It's weird. I've probably never even told anybody about that before because it's so weird. And now I'm sitting here recording this, broadcasting this out to your ears. So I don't know what you think of that, if you've had similar experiences. Inexplicable, weird things. So that cat had this power. I don't think I've ever, because we've had other pets. We had dogs, we had other cats, we had birds, we had fish. No other animal was able to do that. Never had that experience with any other animal, before or since. So there was something special about this cat. And when I left New York and I moved to San Francisco, that cat was still alive. Maybe by that time it was 14, something like that. I don't know. And it would still be able to leap from the floor of the kitchen to the top of the fridge to go up there and menace people. So it never lost its spry power and desire to smack people. And then after some years of me living there, my family moved from the apartment that they were living in New York because it had been sold. And the cat was given to a friend of my mother's who had met the cat and loved the cat. And at this point, the cat must have been 18 years old. And so I don't know what became of that cat, where it is, if it continued to infiltrate the dreams of other people. But I wonder where the cat is now. And now that we're in these waters, these dream time waters, the question emerges of what are dreams? You know, we spend a third of our life asleep. That's not an insignificant amount of time. You know, I'm nearly 40. A third of that time spent asleep. That's 13.3 years. What's happening when we're asleep? And sleep and dream are not the same, right? Because you could be sleeping and not dreaming. So only for a portion of the time that we sleep are we having dreams, and they come in cycles, as far as I understand it. So why do they happen sometimes? Why is our memory of them often very fleeting? You know, you wake up and you may remember a dream, and then within moments to minutes, the dream is gone, unless it was a particularly striking dream, something that left more of an indelible mark on your memory. The dream has this kind of effervescent, ephemeral quality where it just bubbles up and blows away really quickly. Why is that? I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that at a time when I was keeping a dream journal in the past, when I was practicing lucid dreaming when I was a teenager, they called it dream recall. Your ability to remember dreams increased substantially just by journaling. So if that is something you're interested in doing, because I meet people who say, yeah, I don't dream or I don't remember my dreams. I would say that if you are journaling, you'd probably be able to remember more of your dreams. You're helping to train that muscle. So I'm not a dream expert. I have very little experience in this. I am a novice in terms of lucid dreaming. I've done it a few times, but I can't really tell you how that works, why. I could say that it's cool when it happens and you can do whatever you want in a dream where you're flying around, you're in line at the all-you-can-eat shrimp buffet, and you could just have a dream where you're eating shrimp all night long. If you happen to have a shellfish allergy, this may not be the dream for you. Could be a nightmare. But I guess that's a safe place for you to eat shrimp. I never thought about that before, but maybe if you have a peanut allergy, a shrimp allergy, you're allergic to dairy, you're lactose intolerant, one way that you could enjoy those things is by practicing lucid dreaming, where you could eat all the nuts, shrimp, and milk. I'm going to open up a restaurant called Nuts, Shrimp, and Milk. A dream restaurant where you could only access this in the dream world. And all of the waiters are the same white cat with a blue eye and a green eye. Problem is he's deaf, so you can't really get his attention unless you happen to make eye contact. So there are some hurdles to overcome, but I assure you that the shrimp, milk, and nuts are out of this world in this place. You gotta try the pad thai there.
Are you dreaming of nuts, milk, and shrimps? Here at Nuts, Milk, and Shrimp, we'll make your dreams come true. Whether you're lactose intolerant, gluten intolerant, shrimp intolerant, or nut intolerant, you don't need to worry because at Milk, Nuts, and Shrimp, we're reality intolerant. It's so good you'll be pinching yourself asking if you're dreaming, and you will be. But don't pinch too hard or you might wake up without paying. And we don't do this for free, you hear? So come on down and find a meal of your dreams. That shrimp, nuts, and milk. You gotta try pad thai.
Back to dreams. A lot of ancient cultures believed that dreams were the soul's way of communicating, of telling us something that we need to do, something that needs to happen, some way to capture more meaning. That sounds cool. That sounds plausible. That sounds just as plausible, or perhaps more plausible than what science tells us, where it's just a random firing of synapses and we get this flickering set of images, sensations, and feelings that we string together to create a narrative from. I mean, that could be the case. And maybe on a scientific, materialist level, that's even happening. But I would suspect that there's more to it than that, that is just a thin razor's edge of what's happening there. I was speaking to a person last night, coincidentally, and she was saying that she has different dreams depending on where she is. So if she's in Poland, she'll be having a certain kind of dream. If she's in Spain, she'll be having a different dream. If she's maybe in a forest, she's having a different dream. And that's really fascinating to think about too. Because I think if you look at the philosophy of certain famous psychologists like Carl Jung or James Hillman, who was also a Jungian psychologist, there is the sense that we are in a vast field of consciousness. You can call this psyche. You can call this, I think, as Rupert Sheldrake does, a morphic field. Whatever you want to describe it as, some energetic container that we are all inside of, where you might even say that your own thoughts, your own feelings and emotions may not be your own. Like imagine if there is a big field, like imagine a magnetic field. And within this field are transmissions and broadcasts and a whole bunch of things that happen to be passing through us. And then we mistake them for our own. We have been conditioned to instinctively be possessive about things, to move towards ownership, property, buying land, capitalist consumer culture endeavors to make us want to own things. But what if these aren't things to own? Even your body, when you think about it, the body, do you own your body? It's an interesting question. Sure, you have control. Well, even that gets a bit fuzzy and blurry. You have influence over the body. You have a sense that you can command it, right? And I say that this gets hairy and fuzzy because we have control, in quotation marks, over certain things. We can, if we have to piss or shit, we can use some restraint to wait until we get to a toilet or a clearing in a forest and take a piss. But can you willfully not blink for an extended period of time? Can you snap your fingers and fall asleep? Can you slow your heart rate down on command? Can you, levitate? There are limits to what you can do with your body. And most of the things happen automatically. Your heartbeat, your breathing, digestive functions, blood circulation, hormone release, muscular contractions that help you swallow, help you excrete waste. All of these things are beyond conscious intervention for the most part. Maybe there are people in the world who, through dedicated hours of intensive meditation, have some ability to modulate these things, and they can slow their heart rate. They can suspend respiration for maybe amounts of time that are on the edge of the bell curve. But for most of us, those aren't things that we can do. So when I say that we have control over our bodies, I mean, it's kind of limited. Even emotional control, right? If you're not talking about the physicality of the body, and you say, okay, yeah, we may not be able to control those things, but surely we can control our thoughts. Can we, though? Do we? Would you tell someone who's depressed, just cheer up? You know, you've lost a pet. You know, you had a 18-year-old cat that looked very fresh, but was old and died. Can you just not mourn that cat? Can you say, I don't have time for that? I don't want to be sad. Maybe you have a little bit of control over that. You can suppress it and push it down and try not to feel those things. So we have a little bit of control, but for the most part, even our emotions are beyond our control. You know, you see some beautiful, good-looking, smart man speaking to your partner. He's telling jokes. She's laughing. You could see that there's a lot of appeal in this guy. Or if you're a girl, you know, another woman is speaking to your partner. Can you control that little pang of jealousy that springs up? Can you control that little whispering sense of fear or doubt that nags at the back of your neck? I don't know. We can notice those things. I think that's what meditation and mindfulness are great at, making us more aware. They kind of visibilize those things so that they aren't happening outside of our awareness, and we can sit with them. We can engage them. We can let them pass through us. But can we abort them? Can we completely interrupt them from happening and insulate ourselves from feeling, from biological function? Like, no, we can't. So that's what I mean about control. But the question that I started with there was, do we own our bodies? Is your body yours from the perspective of ownership? Or is it more like something you're leasing, something that you're borrowing, a vessel that you are temporarily inhabiting that was rendered from the earth, of the earth, and subsists on the earth? You know, you need to eat, you need to feed it, you need to rest it. You are obligated to do all of these things without your consent, really. If you decided that I'm not sleeping anymore because there's no time for that, life is too short, that's not really something that you can do. You know, try to not sleep for 5 days. And if you do achieve that feat somehow, without caffeine, without methamphetamine, without some marvels of modern medicine, that I think would take an enormous toll on your cognitive function, on your cardiovascular health, pretty much on every aspect of your organism. And doing that over sustained periods of time, I think would probably result in premature death, though I don't have any hard proof or evidence of that. That's just my suspicion. So owning this body is an interesting concept. It seems like it's ours for a time, but do we own it? I am not so sure about that. The same thing with dreams, the same thing with emotions, the same things with ideas. You'll hear a lot of people talk about ideas coming to them. You know, someone may be inspired by a muse and sit down and start to write a novel or record an album or create some piece of art that they didn't even know was inside of them. Similar to our dreams, right? Where do they come from? Are they ours? Or do they emerge from this field, from this thing that they called psyche, where it's this big thing that we're participating in, like a radio signal, and we're all little antennas that can pick things up. And maybe we all have unique little frequencies where there is something special for us to notice, understand, connect with, something to resonate us that we can then describe, share, give to others to help facilitate connection and understanding and mingling. Because to me, when I look around, that seems to be one of these dominant underpinning forces in the universe. Things want to interact. They want to commingle. They want to kind of orgiastically and kaleidoscopically rub up against one another and see what happens. I don't know where the dreams come from. I don't know what the content means. I don't know why they happen, but they do. One idea is that when you're sleeping, all of the constructs, all the narratives and categories and clean lines that we try to carve into reality, which itself is not clean, it is that same blurry, mingling, orgiastic thing where light is diffracting, distorting, bending, blurring. That's what reality is, right? If you've ever taken psychedelics or you've ever been intoxicated, you start to get this sense that everything is mixing and boundaries aren't so clear. That's not to say that there aren't boundaries. Of course there are, but there's also a lot of intersection. And when we're sleeping, we let go. All those things soften. All those things we've created, all the narratives, all the stories, all of the ways of seeing that we've been conditioned by, much like our body and our muscles begin to relax as we sleep. And as we become more fluid, we kind of re-enter those fluid, weird waters that make up the cosmos, right? And we kind of dissolve. Sense of self and ego and all of that dissolves, and we re-enter that water and we go for a ride. To me, that seems more plausible as a way to think about dreams, because our bodies, back to the body, it is a sense organ, right? Why are we embodied? Like, what does the body do? What is the purpose of a body? I think we probably don't fully understand that yet, and I'm not going to offer an idea on what that even is. It seems like something beyond comprehension in a way. When you think of the body, it's really crazy what the body is. It is bone, it is rock, mineral. It's made up of elements like everything else on the earth and in the known world. It is composed of little atoms and molecules, which are mostly empty space with electrical charges made up of elements that come together and mingle and organize themselves into larger structures. And you get a skeletal system of different shapes, different sizes. They interlock. And then on top of that skeletal system is a muscular system, which is again made up of different elements coming together, where there is inside of that muscular system a system of nerves, a system to send and receive electrical impulses, a cardiovascular system where blood is being pumped through that tissue. And once you have all of that stuff happening, now movement is possible. These muscles wrap around the bones, and you have tendons and tissues and soft tissues. You have cartilage that make for really interesting combinations of movement. Look at ballet, look at professional sports, look at the Olympics, at what the body is capable of achieving. It is incredible what the body could do. And not just from the perspective of visual spectacle, but in terms of movement and flexibility and how that feels in the body, like stretching and yoga and going into those positions can impart wisdoms on us. They can teach us things about elemental forces, because the body is a sort of elemental force in that perspective. It's made up of water. It's mostly water. That's another weird thing, that you're this weird electrical bone, muscle, soft, hard, wet, dry, hot, cold thing that can vibrate the air and produce sound, that can sweat, that can consume water, that takes things in from the outside, processes them, and releases them back to the earth changed so that the earth can also metabolize it. We're in this constant dialogue and relationship with the world around us in weird and mystical ways that we don't even understand. We come out of the earth, and when we die, we go back to the earth. And science, at least if we assume modern science to be able to convey real truths, it seems that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? According to laws of thermodynamics. So if that's the case, then we are also eternal and in constant combinations of recomposition and change. And that is fucking magic, right? Even the body itself, if you look at it as one continuous piece of being, which again, that becomes debatable, right? Are you the same you that you were when you were 3 years old? I don't know, but if you look at what the body does between the ages of, say, 3 and 13, there are pretty remarkable changes that happen, even from, the moment of fertilization until birth. Insane things happen. So the body is a magical structure that's undergoing constant transformation and reformation in ways that we don't even really fully understand. I'm kind of going off into the woods here on the body, and I don't know how I got here. We're talking about dreams and ownership and what we possess. But I think we are being possessed by things. I think that's kind of the gist of what I'm saying here, is that there are energies and elemental forces and natural phenomenon that have perhaps a bigger role in who we are, what we do, what we think and feel than we give it credit for, or than we give those forces credit for. Seems to me like we are more at the mercy of those things that are beyond us than we are comfortable admitting generally. And that's okay. I understand why. That's scary to think about. Scary to think that we are all just kind of surfing and riding a wave that we don't know where it's going. We don't know where it came from, but we know that ends in our demise. We know that that wave will eventually crash into the shore. And rightly, that causes some discomfort. People don't want the ride to end. We are uncomfortable with the unknown. What does it mean? So we distract ourselves. We do all these things to avoid looking at and confronting that stuff. And that's okay too. I mean, everything is okay when you look at it from that perspective. But at the same time, I do think that we have and when I say everything is okay, I mean that from the perspective of like all of that is sort of welcome, right? I don't mean okay in the sense that that's all that we have to do. I think that there is some purpose to this. There is some point to this little experiment that we call being alive, being human, being conscious, embodied agents. I think we have some responsibility to the universe, to each other, because we are the universe, right? We are in this vast interconnected web of being, and we have some obligation to be kind to one another, to love one another, to help each other, to support one another, to express gratitude to nature for all that it gives, all of the abundance around us. So things like reciprocity, gratitude, kindness, love, I do think that there is some obligation to channel those sorts of things. But in order to do that, we need to have people who are not doing those things to serve as demonstrations for what the consequences of those other actions are. What does hate produce? What does a hateful person look like? What does the absence of love feel like? What is the role of grief and sorrow? So I think all of that stuff is important and it serves a function. But ultimately, I think the imperative is to move towards love, compassion, kindness, gratitude, reciprocity. If you look at any spiritual teaching, any religion, whether they're modern Abrahamic traditions or you're going back to Buddhism, Hinduism, Confucianism, Taoism, or even older, you're getting into animist practices, Druidic practice. You see it's everywhere. It's pervasive. That there are structures of obligation and certain roles that we have to play, certain respects need to be given. There are certain limitations. There's a sort of order, you can say. So I do think that there is some purpose to all of this. And everybody, I guess, needs to figure out what that is for themselves. And in doing so, they bring that back into the larger community to give a clearer picture of everything that's happening. So everything is welcome, and there's beauty in that. And I know this is a deep ramble. I guess this is what happens when I'm put in front of the mic after many an episode without having the chance to empty these things. They just get pent up and start growing inside. So I'm kind of all over the place right now. But to bring it back, I wanted to speak a bit about grief and sorrow and love, because I started reading an incredible book by Francis Weller. It's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, and I strongly recommend that you check it out. This book, to me, has the same kind of gravity, importance, and depth as another book that I couldn't shut up about on this podcast, which was Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And in this book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, it talks about how important grief and sorrow are for our human organisms. And I wonder, as we are, if everything I've said so far is true, and if we are this earth experiencing itself in a way, we are a sort of earth intelligence. We come from the earth, we're made of the earth, we go back to the earth, we eat of the earth, we drink of it. If that's true, then in some way, maybe the role of sorrow and grief are to help facilitate deeper levels of love and connection. Grief is a sort of fire that we tend from that perspective, because grief shows us that there was something there to love, right? Because everything that we know, everyone we love, everything we love, all of our senses of agency, mobility, coherence, autonomy, we're going to lose all of that, right? Like nature gives us this beautiful bounty, all of this life that comes along with all of the experience, all the richness that we encounter and we have here. Part of that contract that we sign is that we will die. So it's all going to end. We're going to lose it all. And the process of aging and maturation seems to be accepting and sitting with that loss and tending the fire of that grief. Because it's natural to grieve these things, right? We grieve the things that we know we have and we will lose. We grieve the things that we thought maybe we were supposed to have or we expected to have and didn't. And Francis Weller also argues that we grieve these other things that are larger than that, like the grief of our ancestors, the grief of the earth. And I'm wondering if a lot of the kind of collective crises that are unraveling and just spreading across the planet right now are echoes or reverberations of this grief, because we're in the sixth largest mass extinction event on this planet right now, and we are accelerating it. We are destroying ecosystems. We are pouring greenhouse gases into the air. We are polluting the water. We are cutting down the forests. So we are so inextricably bound up in everything that's happening that how could we not be feeling the echoes of these losses, right? Because when a species goes extinct, this is a loss for us. This is a diminished biome. Imagine your microbiome in your stomach, how it's responsible for so much of your health, your brain function, your skin, your circadian rhythms, your emotional state. It's connected to so much of what the body does that if you start to destroy the organisms that are in there, you have serious effects that happen. There are consequences for that, right? And they can be sometimes fatal. It might not just be a bout of terrible food poisoning, days of diarrhea and vomiting and chills, which on its own is a sort of hell, but you might have a proliferation of a certain bacteria or fungal organism or something inside that could be disastrous for the whole. And sometimes that happens, or maybe always that happens through imbalance. When there's too much or too little of something in that system, it can disrupt the entire system, sometimes catastrophically. And if we look at our larger Earth system in a similar way as just another biome, what we're doing is wild. It's devastating. And it's the hallmark of what's happening. It's characterized by this imbalance. We are not living in harmony with nature. We are not respecting the limitations of the system. There's this sense that we should have unfettered autonomy to do what we want, when we want, how we want it, and we call that freedom. But is that freedom? Doesn't sound like freedom to me. That sounds like immature entitlement. So, not sure where I'm going with this at the moment. I feel like I'm a little bit up on a soapbox. So I think I'm going to step down off of that and maybe conclude with a story. Because Asha and I were recently at Slot Art Festival, which is a bit of a problematic name here in Poland because the way that it's pronounced sounds very similar to Slut Art Festival, which would evoke a very different set of imagery. So, and I mispronounced it plenty of times at this festival, much to my embarrassment. But at this festival, we went there to promote the Living Bridge. We went there to promote community building. We went there to just see if people are interested in this kind of stuff because the audience is generally a bit younger. It was kind of people who were in their teens, their early 20s, early 30s. And usually, especially at a festival like this, which is designed to expose people to a lot of different workshops, it was like there was music, there were ways to connect and be around people, there were food stands, there were vendors, there were an assortment of workshops where you could go to a workshop on learning to crack a whip, like Indiana Jones. You could be knocking bottles down off of their perches like a white cat on top of a refrigerator, just slapping hats off with a whip. You could go to a workshop on writing love letters. You can go to anything you can imagine, fire spinning, workshops on eco psychology. They had all kind of stuff there. And so we were wondering who was even going to show up to our workshop, because we were there talking about community building, where effectively people are sitting in a circle of strangers and exploring what's alive in them right now. And often there is pain, there is grief, there is sorrow. There are joys too and other things. But when you're in a space that permits you to safely express feelings that there usually isn't room for, people tend to explore that space and see what it's like to talk about those things. So we had fear that maybe it wouldn't be so attractive because there's so many other competing things and opportunities that people could pursue at this festival. So we were thrilled to see that every day people were coming to join us. Some people stayed for the entire duration of the 4 days that we were offering these sessions. So it was really touching, and it showed that people are interested and people really do crave connection, because there is this epidemic of loneliness, separation, isolation, and disconnection. So that was great. But what was unfortunate about it was that when we got there and we saw the room that we were going to be in, I was a bit scared. Because just to give a little background of this festival, it's been happening for a long time, for decades. We ran into friends who were there who had been there 20 years ago. So let's figure it could be 30 years old. And it's held in a kind of derelict, abandoned sort of monastery that's in varying levels of disarray. And depending on what room you're in, what floor you're on, you may have a room that's not in so much disrepair and is pretty habitable and comfortable, or you may find yourself where we were, which was in a dank, wet, musty fucking dungeon. So we showed up and it was raining, and it rained pretty much the entire time that we were at this festival. Some days there were little moments of sun where intermittently the clouds would part and you'd have the dream of having some sun come and dry up all the rain and make things more pleasant, only to be thwarted by more clouds and more rain. And where we were in the basement when we first went to explore this room and see where they had stationed us, I was a bit terrified, because I was thinking, wow, it smells in here. The shape of the room isn't quite right. I had expected, and we requested, that we would have a room that we could assemble a circle of 20 to 30 people in with a bunch of chairs, and that the room would accommodate that. However, when we got there, we discovered that the room was a really long rectangle. And on the left side, it was kind of sequestered off with some police tape. And on the side was a kind of deep ravine, or like a gutter that was on the left side of this. I don't know what the purpose of the gutter was. Maybe it was to collect the urine of the captives who were imprisoned down in this dank dungeon. Or maybe it was to collect the sins of whoever was praying down in the depths of this monastery. I don't know. But the room was not optimized for the purpose that we needed it for, nor were there any chairs. So there were a series of benches that they had given us, which we had to arrange into some shape that was not a circle, but something more like something between a pentagon and some other shape that I've never seen in a mathematical textbook anywhere. So I had concerns. And I was thinking, wow, are people going to want to sit? Because there wasn't even much light in this room. That was the other problem. There was a window on the far wall when you walked in. That was a few feet in the air, and there were bars over it, of course. And the light that would come in would create this weird, dim ambience of like squalor and destitution. You were in this place that felt sinful and hopeless and despairing. And I was like, Jesus, I don't know if this is going to be suitable. Like, what's going to happen in here? People are just going to come in and immediately want to walk out. And they're sitting on these hard benches with no back support for nearly 2 hours. This is going to be rough. So I had some apprehension about things, but it turned out that not only were people happy to sit, that we were full every day and we had to turn people away. We literally had to shut the door and tell people they couldn't come in, which is ironic considering that the method is predicated on this idea of avoiding exclusion. But that's what it was. And that was an unfortunate spatial limitation that we were dealing with. So it was great. The festival itself was cool. People were nice. We made some nice connections there. And overall, I was very grateful to see that people were engaged in this topic, in this work. So it was really personally touching. But the thing that I wanted to talk about and close out with here is a brief story. And I want to premise it by saying, I am not a judgmental person. At least I don't believe I am. When I meet somebody, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't just jump to conclusions because I know that often we're deeply mistaken. And a lot of our judgments are projections or, So I know the deal. So if you hear in the story that I said, it sounds like I might be judging somebody or a group of people, know that that was not my intention. But this was on the first night that we got there. And it was raining. We had just seen the room. And I was feeling like, fuck, we need to prepare for situations where maybe we don't have more than 3 people, let's say, because they don't want to sit in this room. What do? We can't organize a circle with them. So we had to prepare for certain eventualities that we couldn't really anticipate. I wanted to meditate. I wanted to practice what we were saying, just get our thoughts organized. So we were making our way back from the room to the van where we were sleeping. And on the way, we passed a tent as the rain started coming down, and we took shelter because it seemed inviting. There was this green tent that was being set up. They had pictures of people that looked like they were part of a community, pictures of them dancing, playing music, smiling. There were like little boxes of tea and mate and cookies being put out. So it had a kind of inviting feel to it. And we said, okay, let's just take some shelter under here for a moment and let the rain pass. And when we came in, there was a guy who was working at the counter, and he was being handed goods and boxes of stuff that they had to set up from 2 guys that were in a tall van next to him. So he was kind of setting up at the counter, and they kept passing him more stuff. And we casually kind of engaged and said, hey, how are you doing? What is this? What are you setting up here? They said, oh yeah, we're a community. We're a little kind of intentional community over in Czech Republic, and we sell teas and these cookies and stuff. And yeah, we're going to be here the whole time. Community is really important to us. And I was like, oh wow, that's really cool, because we are here giving workshops on community building, and we spend most of our time volunteering at farms, regenerative land-based projects, eco-villages, permaculture sites. So yeah, if you're in Czech Republic, like maybe we could even visit you guys. Can you tell us a little bit more? And that's when things started to get a little strange, because he said, yeah, of course, and the first thing that he said is, we are a religious community and we focus on the real Bible. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what the real Bible is. I know about the Bible, but I hadn't heard anyone talk about the real Bible before. So this gave me a little bit of a stink of perhaps fundamentalism, or a kind of rigidity in their beliefs. And I was afraid that this might be some fire and brimstone, Old Testament, you're sinner, we are sinners in the hands of an angry God style of Christianity. So we spoke more about it, and it seemed like that was the case. And this is what I mean, where I wasn't trying to be judgmental, but it sounded a bit to me like it was more hardcore Christianity. And I was thinking, okay, you seem peaceful enough. You seem nice enough. Like, I don't want to judge you. I'm going to try to let this go. And I'm going to ask a little bit more about it and just see what the deal is. And as we're having this conversation, I noticed that one of the guys who was inside of the van makes his way behind us and is sitting at a table kind of on the periphery in our blind spot to the left behind us. And I glanced back at this guy, and have you ever met somebody where you don't have any reason why this is the case? And I don't consider myself particularly observant or tuned in to energies of people. I'd say I'm pretty ordinary from that perspective. But you encounter somebody whose energy feels hostile or unfriendly or criminal even. This was the energy of this guy. When I looked back at him, he had a certain quality to his eyes. There was almost like a stink coming off of him from an energetic perspective, like, cigarette smoke or something. If his aura had a color and a texture and a scent, it would be like a black cigarette smoke fragrance. It wasn't nice. So I was just thinking, okay, maybe this guy's having a bad day, or I don't know what the deal is with him, but I'm not speaking to him anyway. He's not speaking to us. But it was weird that he was just staring at us from behind and listening intently to the conversation. So I got the impression he was also the leader of this little space. I could be wrong about that, but he seemed to be directing things, and he was the one taking the break and watching things while everybody else, and by everybody else I mean the two other guys, were working. And we keep speaking to this guy, and I asked him what practices that he's doing there, like how does the community work? And he's like, yeah, we dance, we sing together, like in the photos here. Every day at the start and the end of the day, we talk about our feelings and what's going on with us. And I said, wow, that's great. That's some nice practice that you got going on there. But I was still curious about this religious aspect of it. And I was like, yeah, so you have these beliefs at this place. Is this like an established religion? And he said, yeah, it is. We're actually called the 12 tribes, and we have places all over the world. Our tea comes from Brazil. We're based in Czech Republic. There are places in the States and Germany, all over, and we support each other, and we are established. And I said, oh wow, okay, so there's some history here. You've been around for a while. Even one of the guys in the van had grown up completely in this community. So I said, okay, that's interesting. But one thing that I'm wondering about is, like, what happens when you have someone who comes to your space and they want to volunteer or be there? Do you accept people who are of different faiths? And at this moment, something subtle changed in the atmosphere, in the space. And I could feel like a slight wrinkling on the guy's brow. And it would be that moment in the movie where nothing overt happens, but there's this nuanced negativity, or this very subtle, almost unnoticeable change in tempo or tone, or maybe the music changes, or there's a light that flickers, or something takes on a different quality. And this happened in this moment. And it was also the length of his pause, where he paused and stammered slightly and said, yeah, we anybody could join. And I was like, oh, okay. But I was like, yeah, I understand that certain Christians may not even be of your particular flavor, but what about people who might be like Hindu or Muslim or Jewish, or how do you? This is okay. This is fine. And he was like, yeah. But the way he was saying it, there was something not believable about it. And again, I don't want to judge. I don't think I was being judgmental. I was just picking up on a little bit of a weird cue. And at that point, I was tired. There was stuff we had to do. The rain had kind of let up enough that we could get out of there. So I was disengaging and distancing myself from the conversation, and communicated to Asha, okay, we should probably get going now. It was nice chatting to you guys. Maybe we'll see you during the festival. And we start to walk away, and I'm looking at Asha and I'm whispering. I'm like, I don't know. I got a weird kind of vibe from that. Did you get the vibe like that might be a cult? And right as I'm saying that, we're maybe, 10 or 15 seconds away from this place by now. And one of the guys comes running behind us and he's like,
Hey, you guys, we're just thinking maybe you want to come back and have some tea with us.
and to me, it was shocking. I mean, maybe a nice gesture, but the energy again felt a little bit odd, like a little bit prickly, a little pushy, a little coercive somehow. I can't really name it because nothing overt happened, but there was something, I was getting a weird signal from this whole situation. And I look at Asha and Asha goes, should we go? And I couldn't believe she said that after I just said, do you think that they're a cult? But the strong feeling that I had was no. So I said, no, sorry, we have stuff to do. We have to prepare for tomorrow. We're tired. Thanks for the offer. But like we said, maybe we'll catch you guys. And so he kind of disappointedly started backing up and retreating. And as we're walking away, I look at Asha and I'm like, should we go? Like, what? Should we go? And she's like, yeah, what? Like, I didn't want to be rude or anything. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want to go and have tea with the Mad Hatter and his cronies? And who knows what's going to happen there? I don't know. She's like, we don't know they're a cult. Come on. Like, that's an assumption. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You're right. And maybe I am being a little hasty in making that claim. But I feel that if I go on my phone right now and I look up the 12 tribes, I'm going to find something. I don't know why. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just these people. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe I'm just a fucking judgmental piece of shit. Something rubs me wrong. So we get back to the van. I open up the phone. I search them. And I find Reddit posts. I find YouTube videos, podcast series, all of them talking about how this group is a cult. They are fundamentalists. They are misogynists. They are racist. There is a record of child abuse, sexual misconduct, even on the Wikipedia page. So all you have to do is go to Wikipedia for these people, and there is a litany of things about them. And that's not to mention the podcast. That's not to mention the YouTube. That's not to mention the Reddit. I couldn't believe that this place, the festival, hadn't done a cursory check on these people. What screening had they done to let them in? Because it turned out throughout the festival that it seemed like them being there was almost a way to recruit people to either join them, come visit them. There was a certain energy at the place that, yeah, there was a vibe there for sure. And I don't know about maybe this particular group of them in Czech Republic is fine, and maybe there is nothing weird at all. This is all just weird anecdotal stuff from me and some things that I read on Wikipedia and on the internet. Maybe there was nothing weird about them. Maybe that was just a weird guy who's having a bad day. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to be judgmental, but what it felt like at the time and how it was super strange. And it was just funny that that it seemed we were trying to be recruited by this cult. And yeah, I guess that's a good reminder for people to, although We should all move towards love and trust and connection and openness and vulnerability and embrace our grief and all of the many colors of the rainbow that the human experience affords us. There are also people, forces, energies, things out there that maybe don't wish us well, and we would do well to be cautious and try to protect against some of these things. So that leads to the ending here, which I say every single episode, which is be good to one another. And there are many ways to do that. It could be in a kind smile. It could be picking up something that somebody dropped. It could be helping an old woman across the street. It could be not yelling at somebody when you're frustrated. It could be donating to a charity. It could be listening to someone tell a story without interrupting them. It could be giving somebody a hug. It could be doing the dishes. So yeah, be good to one another. And I will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. I'm not going to play the buy a billboard thing because I'm just going to say it live and say I appreciate you for listening and subscribing and liking and supporting. And I encourage you to share it with your friends. I encourage you to not get a billboard, but maybe create a giant effigy of me somewhere, like a temple or a shrine. Maybe you could call it the 13 tribes. We could form a group, an international group of solidarity and commitment to a vision of like really intense fire and brimstone kind of stuff. That would be cool too.